Welcome back to another episode of Hawk Off the Press. My name is Madison Hricik. I am the Iowa football beat reporter for the Gazette, and it's bowl prep time, ladies and gentlemen. We are talking about the ReliaQuest Bowl. Iowa and the number 14 Vanderbilt will play on New Year's Eve. It's a New Year's Eve bowl, which is very exciting. At noon Eastern, 11 Central in Tampa, Florida. And to break down this bowl matchup, I have 247 reporter Alaina Morris joining the show. Welcome. And congratulations, you just graduated college. That's so exciting.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot to talk about with this particular matchup for a number of reasons. I mean, obviously we can go into individual player matchups and things like that. One thing I want to start with, though, I think that kind of should be addressed first off. This is the first ever matchup between these two teams. And again, this is kind of why bowl games are sometimes really exciting, is you get matchups that maybe you wouldn't expect or anticipate having. And you get in 2025, you get a matchup with two teams that have never played each other, but have played college football for a long time. So I'm curious, Alaina, what was your initial impressions when you found out that it was going to be Iowa Vanderbilt for this bowl game?
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely two interesting teams. They play a different style of football, but like you said, I mean, they've never played before, so that makes it a lot more fun.
Yeah, I think one of the things that stood out to me particularly with this matchup is just how Iowa head coach Kirk Ferentz and then Vanderbilt head coach Clark Lea, when they had their bowl contract signing last week, they talked about it's a very classic like offense versus defense style football game where it's Iowa's defense has always kind of had that reputation. And now Vanderbilt's offense has really kind of had this reputation over the last season. I mean, do you agree with that? Do you feel like that's going to be kind of the overarching theme of this bowl game? What was your take on that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, Vanderbilt's offense is averaging 39 points per game this season, so they're definitely one of the best offenses in the country. And when I think of Iowa football, I automatically think of low-scoring, defensive-heavy games. And so I would say that's definitely a good way to put it, is defense versus offense in this game. And there have been times that Vanderbilt's defense has shown up this year, so I think that that'll be a big factor in this one as well.
Yeah, I think ironically enough, like it's going to be offense defense in terms of like I guess the expectations and what you expect out of these two teams from those last year. But I almost do wonder, yeah, is it going to be the inverse? Is it going to be Iowa's offense and Vanderbilt's defense that's going to be the driving factor of this game? But let's talk about Vanderbilt's season overall. I mean, this was a team that was knocking on the door of the college football playoff, basically down into the last minute, missed their opportunity, came in at number 14. What was your overall impression of this past season in Leah's, second year leading this team and getting them almost in the conversation throughout the entire year to be in that 12-team playoff?
I mean, yeah, it's interesting. Clark Lee's done a great job. He played football at Vanderbilt, and so you can tell how much he cares about the program. And they weren't successful his first few seasons, and then he hires a couple of guys from New Mexico State and Tim Beck and Jerry Kill, and they bring Diego Pavia with them, and they go 7-6. And that's Vanderbilt fans were very excited over that. They won the Birmingham Bowl with Diego Pavia, and then I think there were some expectations this season that Vanderbilt fans hadn't felt in a while because they hadn't had that success in so long. And I think that they exceeded expectations. I mean, this was the program's first 10-win season in history. And so the fact that they were able to reach that, I think that, obviously it was a disappointment to the program and the fan base that they weren't able to make the college football playoff. But I think I also like the way that, Clark Lee really took that. He was kind of saying afterwards, after they missed out, hey, we had every opportunity to. We lost to Alabama. We lost to Texas. Like, we can only blame ourselves. We can't blame other people. And so you have to like the way that he kind of accepted that responsibility of, all right, we went 10-2 and that wasn't good enough. We can't blame anybody but ourselves. But definitely a great season overall. It feels like the vibes in Nashville are definitely high because of that. And, like I said, it's definitely history for the program. And so I think everyone's looking forward to this bowl game.
I think one of the things you mentioned with Clark Lee's ability to just kind of take responsibility for the fact that they didn't make the playoff and it was on the team. I think that really did stand out to me. And I think some of it came from the fact that, you also had Notre Dame opting out of the bowl after opting out of a bowl game after not making a playoff. I think there was a total of 7 teams opted out of a bowl game this year. And so it was interesting watching once the Iowa Vanderbilt matchup was confirmed, how everything else kind of trickled down. But I mean, you talk about the SEC and kind of how dominant that conference has been in the national conversation for as long as they have. Vanderbilt's never really been in the dominant side of that category until these last couple of years. And I have their schedule pulled up right now. I mean, a 31-7 win over South Carolina. That was a South Carolina team at the time that was still in the conversation of being a nationally recognized team. Obviously, they did not play the year that they wanted. But then you go to Alabama, and that game didn't work out. Then they beat LSU and Missouri before losing to Texas. So if you look at the schedule for the most part, it's pretty. I mean, it's a pretty great schedule in terms of how things work. I do want to mention the win over Tennessee because I know that's the big rivalry for Vanderbilt, but that seemed like the game that kind of really put Vanderbilt in the conversation of can they sneak in? Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, I think for a while people were, they had the idea that Vanderbilt could be a playoff team, but it was more so, all right, if they beat Tennessee, how do they beat Tennessee? Like, is it going to be a close game that comes down to the end? Or if Vanderbilt flat out dominates or wins by a large margin, in which they did, it wasn't a dominant first half, but they absolutely just won every margin in the second half and they beat Tennessee. And so it was more so just, all right, how do they win that game? If they do, does that push them into the college football playoff? It didn't, but you had to like the performance that they put on, winning that game by as much as they did, especially in the second half when, it was really back and forth in the first half. And at one point they were down by 14.
Yeah, I mean that was one of those games I had my eye on because of the fact that it was kind of okay. If Tennessee wins, that definitely knocks Vanderbilt out of the conversation. But what would happen if Vanderbilt won? So it was interesting seeing it play out. Let's talk individuals here, and I'm going to go to the one that we're all going to talk about is Diego Pavia, and him came in second in the Heisman vote this year. Fernando Mendoza from Indiana winning it this year. How have you seen Diego make the step from last year getting the Birmingham Bowl win to making the jump to runner up for the Heisman this year?
I think the first thing that comes to my mind is his accuracy, especially with his downfield passing. Felt like last year he would overshoot his targets or just those throws weren't the most accurate, weren't the most timely, but I think this year just being a downfield passer, he could put throws right on the money. He could place balls exactly where they needed to be and set his players up for success. And so that is the first thing that really sticks out in my mind. And then also just his playmaking ability. You can tell that he's become a smarter player with playing in the SEC, it's tough. And so having a year of that experience under your belt, I think that helped him really going into this year, knowing what he could and couldn't do. But I think just the accuracy in his passing was the biggest step that he took this year.
Yeah, and looking at those numbers, he had 242 completions on 340 attempts, 27 passing touchdowns. That's insane. And only 8 interceptions. So the number is kind of like impressive to just even think about. And then on top of the passing numbers, you have his rushing numbers with 9 rushing touchdowns, with a net of just shy of 830 rushing yards. So he's pretty mobile too. And I think that was what made him so dangerous, just watching it from the outside looking in. Now, if we're going to talk about Diego, we have to talk about the Heisman and everything that's gone on since Fernando Mendoza won. Obviously, the social media posts went pretty viral. Pavia put out that statement on social media. I think it was Sunday or Monday night. I'm curious, how has that gone over just with the general Vanderbilt fan base in what you've heard from conversations with the coaching staff and other players? Like what has that kind of been like since all of that went down?
Yeah, it's interesting. I can kind of break it up by group as you were mentioning. I know the fan base, some of them were obviously disappointed in his actions and the language that he used. And, this is a guy that wasn't recruited coming out of high school. He had 0 stars. He had to go the JUCO route to New Mexico State to the SEC. So, he had a very untraditional path. And so, for someone like that, you want to root for the underdog, it feels like in those kind of stories. But it makes it really tough when you are in these situations where, hey, I want to root for this guy, but he's making it really hard to because, this is a Vanderbilt program that is really, this was their best season in program history. And so they don't have this tradition of national championships and excellence and all these things. So he doesn't necessarily, have the ability to be like, oh, this is a program where we win. I can say these things. Vanderbilt is just getting to the point where they're being put into the conversations. And so I think for him, it's like, act like you've been here kind of thing. I think there was just some disappointment in that he, you could tell he was a little bit new to the situation, new to the scenario. And I think the fan base was just disappointed in the fact that he chose to do some of the things that he did because he has been a fun guy to root for. And, that you see him going out in the community and doing good things as well. And so it was just a poor decision that, that's going to be the thing that people think about and talk about. And I'm sure the coaching staff encouraged him and told him, hey, maybe you want to address this. And he did end up putting up an apology on social media, which I personally felt like was the right decision. Obviously, you can't take back what you did, but you can kind of, address that and be like, hey, this is what I said and I'm sorry. And that's what he did. He took accountability for his actions, which as somebody who is, in college in your 20s, that can be a difficult thing to want to do is to, to own your mistakes and accept that. And so that is something he did. And so you kind of have to like tip your hat to that. And I think the players, they know, they weren't condoning his actions, but when, you go on social media, like that's their quarterback. And so they're not going to go and be like, hey, we like what you did. But they showed up to the Heisman Trophy ceremony. They're posting that, hey, he's our Heisman, he's our Heisman. So you can tell that his teammates really do appreciate him as a player and as a person. Obviously, it's a tough situation, but he put out an apology, and you have to think that, going forward, he's learned from it and hopefully can move on from all of that.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that stood out to me watching all of that kind of go down was the fact that one, he did take public accountability of it by releasing that statement, owning up to his actions, but also the fact that like there was a genuine massive push, not necessarily just from Vanderbilt, from the entire SEC to kind of put him towards the limelight in that Heisman candidate, in that Heisman race. And so I think some of it also ties into that too is like you have the natural disappointment any human would. But I was pleasantly surprised to see just kind of how he reacted and put out the statement to take the accountability a little bit. And at the moment, it sounds like he's still planning on playing in the bowl game. He's put it at the end of his statement that he was looking forward to playing in the bowl game against Iowa. And so last we've talked to Iowa head coach Kirk Ferentz. He said all of the Iowa players that he knew of were planning on playing in the bowl game on New Year's Eve. So it looks like there'll be two teams with basically the rosters that we've seen all year, at least for a part of this game. So how much do you think that could also just make things a little bit more exciting when you look at this matchup?
Yeah, it does for sure. And honestly, there wasn't really much doubt in my mind that he wasn't going to play. Like, if you've watched Vanderbilt football, had conversations, been in the same room as Diego Pavia, he loves to just play the sport anywhere at any time. And he's such a competitor that I just assumed he was playing. I didn't really have much doubt that he would. And so, like you mentioned, with bowl games, so many players opt out to prepare for the NFL draft and get ready for their professional careers. And so, it definitely makes it a lot more interesting that both sides are going to be at full strength, and I think that'll make it more of a fun matchup to watch.
Do you anticipate there's being some opportunities for the Vanderbilt coaching staff to try and mix in some of that younger development? I mean, Bobby is a senior. He's going to play in this game, obviously, but you also have to be mindful of the fact that a bowl game sometimes can also be an opportunity to see how the next person that could take over a starting role steps up. Do you see some of that playing into this as well, or do you think it's going to be pretty much just the starters all through, almost like it's an SEC game?
Last year they played Georgia Tech in the Birmingham Bowl, and that was pretty close throughout the entire thing. And it felt like, at least from what I can remember, they played mostly their starters. Maybe this year will be a little bit different. I think it's more so, you know, they've seen what the backup quarterback Blaise Berlowitz can do. They've seen some of these other guys come in situations where, they played smaller teams this season at the beginning of the year in their non-conference or, in wins and losses and just wanting to get other guys in. I think they know what they have. Just kind of being around the program, I would feel like they are more towards like, this is a football game we want to win. It might not be the college football playoff, but this is still a meaningful game to us. And so in my mind, as long as this is a close game, I imagine that Diego Pavia is going to be taking snaps almost the entire time, as well as most of the other starters.
Yeah, and we'll mention another starter here right now. Let's talk about tight end Eli Stowers. He just won the William B. Campbell Trophy, the academic Heisman. And Iowa's Aaron Graves was a finalist for that award as well. And I mean, Phil Steele, excuse me, All America third team member, Associated Press's All SEC second team. Played in all 13 games and had a really impressive season. What have you seen out of the tight end's ability to make some plays this year?
Yeah, as of the last time that we talked to Clark Lee, he also said that he believes Eli Stowers is playing in this game, and don't think that's changed as of right now. And so he also won the John Mackey Award, going to the nation's top tight end, and he is just so impressive to watch because he has the body of a tight end, but he moves like a wide receiver. He's so quick, he can climb the ladder, and he makes plays just all over the field. It felt like anytime Vanderbilt needed a third down or a big play to happen, at least in my head, I was thinking, all right, I imagine they're probably going to want to go to Eli Stowers would be the number one option. And so he's just such a consistent, solid presence for this Vanderbilt offense. And he also can block really well outside of being able to move and catch the ball, but definitely shown his ability, to make plays as a tight end. And that's why he's going to be, one of the top players in his position in the NFL draft this season as well.
I think one of the things that's so intriguing about it is like and maybe this is kind of the case with a lot of Vanderbilt players as this program is starting to have a little bit of an emergence into the national conversation is, everyone's eyes were on Pavia all year long, just in general. And then it almost felt like Stowers just kind of was like sneakily there the entire time. Not in a bad way by any means, but because he was so consistent all season long. I'm curious how has Vanderbilt taken advantage of just Stowers' consistency? You mentioned the third downs, but I mean, for someone to be able to have this season that he had 4 touchdowns, but he had a reception in almost every game this year, if not every game.
Yeah, I think they just knew that they always had him. That he had 2 games where he, had over 100 yards receiving, and so he had the ability to get open, make plays in space, make contested catches as well. And so it's just, he's not a one-trick pony. Like, all right, go out here and block, or oh, we can only run a certain amount of plays for him. Like he can really do a lot. And then they also mix in their other tight end, Cole Spence, with him, who's more of a blocking tight end, but he can also like get open as well. It's really interesting watching when he gets open. Like he gets wide open. The plays they run for him and just the misdirection they use. Tim Beck really gets those 2 tight ends involved, but Eli Stowers especially, just all of his abilities. And I think that, unless you've been watching Vanderbilt football, you wouldn't know that he's only been a tight end for 2 years, really, in the SEC. And before that, when he signed to Texas A&M, coming out of high school, he was a quarterback. So tight end was not his natural position. Then he moved to New Mexico State and started to get into that role, and then came to the SEC and was one of the best tight ends in the league. And so just the fact that he can do what he's done in this position where has only had a limited amount of time also makes it just that much more impressive.
Yeah. All right, let's switch sides of the ball here. We've talked a lot about the offense. Let's talk a little bit about this Vanderbilt defense. What have you noticed from this defensive unit as a whole throughout this year? They haven't gotten the same amount of attention in the national spotlight the way that Pavia and the offense has. But what have you seen out of that defense for them to be able to have some of these blowout wins like the one against Tennessee to end the regular season?
Yeah, they're a really solid defense all around, but at least for me, the front 7 is what won them that game. I mean, their defensive line and just the ability to get to Joey Aguilar in that game, that's what really stood out to me. Tennessee has a great offensive line, and they didn't give up too many sacks this season. And so just the fact that Vanderbilt had the ability to put pressure on the quarterback is what stuck out and what I think allowed them to win that game, especially in the second half.
Yeah, I think it's 29 sacks by the Vanderbilt defense this year. They're getting to a quarterback. That is for sure. And then I'm curious, what about that front 7 has worked so well? Is it the experience? Is it just the schematics that they're working? Is it just how they just set up for when they're going to blitz versus just like what have you seen that's worked so well for that defense to be able to get 29 sacks on a season, or just be able to have a little bit more of a chaotic game in the trenches maybe than a lot of people sometimes expect?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of the schematics, but also the depth. At least, being at camp in the summertime, the coaches were talking about how much depth the front 7 really had. That was, the issue they had last season is they didn't have a lot of it. And when guys would get banged up, you could tell that, they were really struggling up front. But this year you just saw so many different players get involved. And I think that's why they were so successful, is just the depth that they had up front.
Mhm. And now we'll start transitioning a little bit. I'd like to say I'm going to quiz you a little bit here. I'm really not. I'm just kind of curious. Big Ten football and SEC football. This is a conversation that we could talk about for hours, I'm sure, but they're very different types of football. How can you see Vanderbilt meshing and trying to counteract the Big Ten football style that Iowa has, that low scoring, gritty, very physical style of football that the Hawkeyes are a little bit more known for?
Yeah, I think that one thing that, I imagine Vanderbilt will try to do is just own the time of possession. Feels like in those games that are a little bit more gritty, hard-nosed, defensive heavy, it's who has the ball more, and Vanderbilt has been pretty good at that. Not this past season, but 2 years ago when they beat Alabama when they were number 1 in the country. If you look at the time of possession in that game, they held the ball for, the majority of it. I wanna say 40 minutes of the 60 in that game, and so if Vanderbilt can hold the ball more, especially with the offense they have, I think that that will help them, to go up against a very good Iowa defense.
And out of curiosity, at this point, when you're doing all of this bowl prep and everything, what has stood out to you the most about Iowa's defense and offense? Have you noticed anything that you're like, oh, that's something I wouldn't have expected, or something that like a particular player that's caught your eye? What have you noticed in just kind of I guess early still got a couple weeks before this game, but in just kind of your research and learning about this team?
Yeah, I would just say I pay a little bit more attention to the Iowa defense, just the way that they, the point of attack and the way that they get to the football. Just, I think it's going to be interesting to see how Vanderbilt's offense kind of plans for that game. Just if you look at all of the games that Iowa plays in, they're low scoring, they like to play defense. And so for Vanderbilt, it's all right, how do we come up with something that's going to, throw them off of that? Because they've seen some of the best offenses, in the country in the Big Ten, especially, I mean, that's a league that has the 2 top teams, in the college football playoff in Indiana and Ohio State, and you also have Oregon. And so I know a lot of people talk about the SEC, but the Big Ten is also an incredible football conference. And so Iowa has seen a lot of it, but it's how Vanderbilt, I think, is going to plan their offense around that is just kind of what I would be looking for in this one.
Right. So I ask this question to everybody when we do an opponent breakdown for Iowa football games. What does Vanderbilt need to do? What's the one thing that you would say they have to do this if they want to earn this bowl win? And then what's the one thing Iowa has to do to be able to beat Vanderbilt for a bowl win?
As far as Iowa, it'd be probably just slowing down Diego Pavia. I mean, we talked about his stats already. He's such a dual threat quarterback. I've seen him make something out of nothing before, and just making sure you have eyes on him. That's going to be the main thing for Iowa if they want to win this game, is being able to slow him down, because you don't have to give him a whole lot of space, but he can go out there and create. And then not to just, flip the switch, but it's the same thing for Vanderbilt. Let Diego Pavia make plays. I mean, if you just give him the opportunity, if a play breaks down, you don't have to panic yet. Let him go out there and do what he does best. I mean, there's a play that just comes to mind. They were playing LSU and it was 4th and 1, and it looked like he was about to get sacked. Like, that play looked completely broken down. He ducked it, rolled out, and threw a first down. And so just seeing that firsthand, if you're Vanderbilt, just put the ball in his hands. And so I think this game really comes down to Diego Pavia. Is Vanderbilt going to call the right plays that allows him to get the offense going, or is Iowa going to shut him down and pick up a bowl win?
So now I know that we'll see things evolve over the next couple days leading up to both teams heading down to Tampa, the bowl practices and all of that kind of stuff. So things can obviously change. But at this point, on December 17th at about 1:33 p.m. Eastern time for you, what is your score prediction and why do you have that score prediction?
I don't want to just seem like, oh, I'm the Vanderbilt person here, so I'm going to favor them in this game, but just watching them firsthand all year, I think I would give them the leg up just because of what I've seen them do offensively. I do think if they come out in a slower start, it's going to be tough for them to win this game. But, given the way that they played at Tennessee, they fought back in the Texas game, even though they lost. Just the way that they can score the football, the different types of plays that they run, I would probably favor their offense a little bit more in this game. I do think it's going to be more low scoring, because when you have 2 good defenses also going up against each other, makes things a little bit tougher. I mean, Vanderbilt played Missouri. That was a 17-10 game. So we've seen Vanderbilt get in those low scoring fist fights like that. But I do favor Vanderbilt in this one. I'd probably have them winning by a touchdown. I'd say 24-17, something around that mark. But I think it'll be a pretty close one until the end. I would just favor the Commodores offense a little bit more at the moment.
I think it's a very fair score prediction. I mean, I'll be so honest, like Iowa fans that have followed the game picks that I've done all year long, I am terrible at picking scores, absolutely terrible at it. But I'm always interested to hear other people's perspectives on it because you guys always know the team you cover a little bit better than the team that we cover, and vice versa. So it's fun to hear those score predictions. And Alaina, thank you so much for joining. This has been a ton of fun getting to chat about this bowl game. And you're doing some great work over there. And obviously balancing college and a job is never easy, but you made it. You've graduated, which is awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. If you guys like this content, I have a podcast that comes out every single week. And then we also have a free newsletter with the exact same name, Hawk Off the Press, that you can sign up for. Those get released every Friday morning. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.